let's get into our major topics of tonight, and something that is they're generating controversies. Some of these stories that we're bringing to the fore tonight. The federal government is proposing to extend the period for the implementation of the removal of subsidy on premium motor spirit (PMS), popularly known as petrol, by 18 months. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. President Buhari, announced this while briefing State House correspondents in Abuja. It says that the government has concluded plans to approach the National Assembly to amend the Petroleum Industry Act. Take a listen to him.
That's why we are coming out to say, look, before the expiration of this time, this is what we intend to do. And if you listen carefully, I also mentioned to you that we engaged the legislature. Or we believe that this will go to the legislature will apply for some amendment of the law so that we will still be within the law. We are proposing an 18-month extension, but what the National Assembly is going to approve will be up to them. We will approve an 18-month extension. We will propose an 18-month extension, and then, of course, it's up to the National Assembly to look at it and then pass the amendment as they see fit. And you are all aware that steps are being taken for all refineries to be functional very soon. The Dangote refinery is expected to come on stream at the end of this year. All our refineries, the Port Harcourt refinery, is expected to be performing at a certain capacity, not full capacity, by end of this year. There are some modular refineries that are also going to come on stream later this year.
You heard the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. President, there. So there is a thinking in the minds of the federal government, although one will see that it's a clear shift from what the federal government position as being a few months ago, especially towards the end of last year, and perhaps when the PIO was passed. Now, there seems to be a policy change. There are reasons for it. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Labour Congress has suspended its planned nationwide protest over the proposed removal of fuel subsidy. The Congress reached the decision after its National Executive Council meeting. According to the NSA President, Mr. Ayuba Waba, the decision was reached following the suspension of the proposal to stop the subsidy on petrol by the federal government. Take a listen to the NSA President.
The NEC, after vigorous debate, took a decision to suspend the planned nationwide process scheduled for 27th of January 2022, and the national protest also scheduled for 2nd of February 2022. The leadership of the Congress have communicated this organ decision to our civil society allies, who have stood stoically behind us and behind Nigerian workers in our quest for social and economic justice for workers and the downtrodden people of our country. Going forward, we will continue to engage with government on the very critical issue of ensuring local refining of petroleum products, creation of sustainable jobs, and affordable price of petroleum for Nigerians, and particularly Nigerian workers.
Well, the case may have been different if should the federal government had gone ahead to say it was going to remove subsidy on petrol, because that would have had a dovetailing effect on the price of not only petrol, but on commodities generally. Those are the positions of experts. But hold that on one hand, perhaps on your left. If you're right-handed, perhaps you just hold it, because it's one of the issues that we would be discussing. On the flip side, the National Assembly has re-amended the Electoral Act Amendment Bill to include provisions which clearly define the mode of primaries for political parties. Both chambers passed the harmonized version of the bill, which now includes direct, indirect, and consensus methods for political parties to nominate candidates for electoral position. Today's amendment to the electoral bill is done to harmonize the position of the Senate and House of Reps on consensus candidate. That was an introduction from the Senate. The House accepted it, and the bill is now ready to be transmitted to the president for his assent. Take a listen to the leaders of the two chambers of the National Assembly, Honorable Gbajabiamila and Senator Ahmed Lawan.
We have concluded on our task on the amendment to the Electoral Act number 6, 2010 bill. You will recall that the Senate and the House passed the Electoral Act amendment bill with slight difference. While the House passed the mode of primaries to be direct and indirect only, the Senate passed the mode of primaries to be direct, indirect, and consensus. What we have done is to give very clear and sufficient definition to each mode of primaries. The direct primaries is well defined and how it will be conducted. Ditto the indirect primaries. And for the consensus, the two chambers have produced in this bill now very clear definition of how a consensus candidate would emerge.
I think the House and the Senate have decided to add, I believe, the consensus provision so that there will be no need for conference, but with certain provisos. And those provisos, hopefully, we'll be able to agree and insert them today to protect all aspirants for all positions, so that we'll all have an even playing field.
All right, then. House of Reps Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila, Senate President Ahmed Lawan. You now have clarity on what is happening. I've had an opportunity to look at what that bill is based on the harmonization. Now, the consensus is explained, and what they're saying basically now from what they harmonized today is that if you do not agree on the consensus, every party in the consensus on the consensus table does not agree. If anyone does not agree, they have to go to direct or indirect primaries, as a party may decide. It does look like there's some explanation more based on what we had from the Senate. So let's get into it. So I told you, hold the issue of the subsidy on the left hand, and perhaps hold this other one on the electoral bill on your right hand, and let's put everything together. Let's get perspective to all of these issues. I'm being joined tonight by the SSA to the President and liaison to the National Assembly, Honorable El Yakub, and the Publicity Secretary of the PDP, Mr. Debo Ologunagba. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming.
Thank you for having us.
The President has said, let's begin with the electoral bill, can we? I mean, or the subsidy. Let's begin with the subsidy. Yesterday, then NBA President said, this is probably a political decision. It might not be something that is basically economic issues, but is the government under pressure on this issue of subsidy and being pushed to make this decision as a reaction to what is possible that Nigerians will react to?
Well, I believe the government is being responsible. It's a listening government. The Nigerians have spoken, and they have listened. And I'm sure you understand that policies and programs of government are all geared towards achieving an end. What is that end? Primarily to deliver service to the Nigerian people. And indeed, exigencies of any moment dictates what a government does. You've just mentioned the Electoral Act and the amendments that have been that has just happened, and just like many other laws. When you set out, just like the PIA envisaged that the subsidy could be removed in the first 6 months after the assent. And it's clear that other parameters had to be looked at, conditions have to be assessed, socially, economically, and in various aspects of our lives. And so, yes, the NLC has spoken, the Nigerian workers have spoken, Nigerians have spoken, and the government has looked inwards also to see that, hey, is it the right time to take out this subsidy? There are other conditions precedent that we should have actually attained before we think of removing it completely. And I'm sure from the explanation of the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum, you understand that certain expectations, like what would bring about cheaper energy to the country in terms of PMS and other petrochemical derivatives, is the refineries that will be coming on stream, that of the Dangote, indeed the modular ones, as well as the refurbishment that's going on the existing Nigerian refineries.
So he mentioned also that there will be an amendment today to the PIA to accommodate this new decision. That's going to be an executive proposition to the National Assembly. Is that being prepared?
Yes, that's in the works, and certainly, like he said, we are going to make a proposal, but it is up to the National Assembly to accept that proposal of 18 months to increase or decrease that proposal. Because there
are two things that will be done. You have to amend the law, then you also need to make a supplementary budget, because in the budget of 2022, it's only captured between January and June. July is supposed to be another regime where we should not be paying subsidy. So those are two things. Is the federal government working on that as we speak?
Yes, the government is working on a supplementary budget as we speak. And I'm sure you also know that when the President assented to the Appropriation Act 2022, he made mention of certain things that he would like the National Assembly to look at in terms of, the budget as passed by them as opposed to the one presented to them, with a view to saying that, okay, it's a work in progress. We can certainly bring supplementary appropriation, or in fact, environment, so that we can move funds
there's a possibility of an increment in the envelope, in the general budget envelope, because with all of this, there's a speculation that the entire budget might increase from what the president has presented. But let me allow Mr. Logun Agba. I mean, from the opposition point of view, what's your reaction on government's decision to reverse its earlier stand on removal of subsidy on petrol?
Thank you, Sharon, and Happy New Year. We haven't seen this yet.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's sad that Nigeria is at this crossroad with regards to this. On the issue of petroleum subsidy, and I would think we should step back and go into the history. In 2011, then candidate or aspirant Buhari made public statement as to the fact that subsidy payment is a fraud, and that he would need someone to prove that to him, that if anybody says there's subsidy, that clearly that's a fraud.
Which was being paid at the time by the PDP government.
Which was being paid at that time by the PDP government. Two things could come from that deduction, or that statement. Either that the candidate then, now Mr. President, is unaware, or he did not read at that time. Because subsequent event from 2015 up to now, from the records, shows an astronomical increase in the amount credited for payment of subsidy. In any event, we talk about subsidy. The primary purpose of government is the security and welfare of the people. And in any government all over the world, there are subsidy and there are cushioning effect that is embedded in the policy of government to help the most vulnerable in society. And I think when we talk about petroleum product, we must be talking about our peers. What are the OPEC members doing? Do they disregard their people, all in the name of economies that are not well thought through? Because you need people to be able to have an economy. I make reference to the United States, I think the last quarter of last year, when the prices of petroleum product was going up. the president stepped in and released from the strategic reserves that brought down the prices for the pump. What does he do? It was targeted at the people. Now, if you look at the policy of this government, you can't be any clear policy direction on any issue. You take petroleum product, you take agri, you take the economy generally. There are no policy coordination.
I mean, the reverser, is it an error on the side of government, or what does the PDP, what would the PDP would love that the APC government, assuming your party is in government, what would you have done differently?
Yes, what we would have done differently, and which was what we did, was the fact that when you have a policy, you should think through it and seek expert advice. And I get back to the issue of the petroleum product. Now, I heard the Minister of State mention some modular, no specific, some modular refineries are coming up. When we talk about the issue of payment of subsidy and all the amount that is involved in it, how do we get here? First of all, you talk about the fact that all the 3 refineries are not working. When a Minister of State for Petroleum speaks to Nigerians, what we'll expect is to have specific information for us. In his comment, he said the Port Harcourt refinery will come to some percentage of performance. Today, the capacity is between 20 and 25%. Kaduna refinery is comatose, it's practically dead. This president and the APC government promised in 2015 that the refineries will be up and be repaired and be refurbished, and that new ones will be built. That's to tell you that when you put this government, the APC government, to task, they make promises and they change it.
As far as the PDP is concerned, they're not happy with what, because, I mean, NLC said they're not going on strike again.
Yes.
Isn't that good news, at least momentarily?
Absolutely good news for the Nigerian people, and we support that. In any event, we have said, this is the most unlikely time and the most unfair time to even consider the idea.
All right.
And we said that last year.
Yeah. Let me allow Honorable Ali Yakub to react to what the opposition had said tonight.
Well, Sharon, I believe, I'm glad you even mentioned the opposition is talking about refineries. How did we get here? How many years had PDP governed or ruled Nigeria? And what was the fate of those refineries? And when we talk about, subsidies and the factors of production, the refineries had been comatose forever, literally under the PDP regime. In fact, I'm sure we all remember the scandal around the subsidy regime during the PDP government. Having said that, this government, as he mentioned earlier, about cushioning effects when you have policies that affect the livelihood of the Nigerians, I'm sure it has to be given the credit that we have done an unprecedented level of, unprecedented level of impactment through the initiatives of social engagement and mobilization, and in fact, even the agricultural sector that he's talking about. We can see that Nigerians have returned to the farms. They have, just recently we saw the rice pyramids in Abuja, in addition to so many government interventions in various aspects of the Nigerian life. Nigerians have been supported in small scale and medium enterprises. There are so many agencies of government saddled with the responsibility. They are so numerous to mention, from the COVID intervention to the XMIS, to the small and medium enterprises, to trader money, market women money. So many social programs that have put resources in the hands of Nigerians.
Because
that's part of the...
Yeah, I'll allow Mr. Debo Olugaba to react to what he said, because a lot of people will say that 18 months, you are obviously passing the burden on to the next government that is coming in.
Well, I can tell you we are not, because certainly, like I said, there are considerations, and those things that would happen to even make things easier in terms of reduction. Why do we have subsidies? Why do we import petroleum products? Because our refineries are not working. But if we do have the refineries working, it means that the prices will come down, and therefore Nigerians will not feel the effect, and it will be dictated by demand and supply.
So the question is, now that you raised, is that when you're talking about refineries, does the PDP, can the PDP come to the public to speak about it? Because it's laid an allegation that under your government, the refineries were moribund.
I see, each time I come to this conversation, and I hear these weather-beating excuses by the APC, so now I shudder. Now, and a bad workman complains about his tools, and a hopelessly irredeemable one complains about others. APC has been in government for close to 8 years. Please give us a break. Nigeria didn't elect APC to give us excuses. And my brother, my honorable brother, Yakub, referenced a couple of policies. And again, I just wonder, who are we supposed to support? You mentioned pyramid. And the question is this. In the agri sector, if indeed there's abundance of rice as provided in those pyramids, the pyramid that there are conversation and allegation that actually there are wooden pyramids. It happened in 2018 in one of the southwest states, where a pyramid of wood was created and rice was placed on it. It was in the public domain. We don't know what is now, but we saw a pyramid. It's actually very insulting to Nigerians to find that the federal government is placing pyramids in Abuja rather than in the areas where they are needed. In any event, if indeed that is an abundance of production of rice, then we should have seen a corresponding reduction in the prices. Today is an average of 30,000 in the market. 2, if indeed we have improved in our production of rice and other food products, then that should reflect in the price and in the strength of our currency, which means we will be importing less, and means there will be less pressure on the exchange processes. So if we look at everything, we might not have enough time to do it. Again, in all the interventions you talk about, the COVID-19 so-called palliative, we knew where it went. They were busted in several warehouses all over the country. Again, this is something we should be happy about as a country.
We're due for a break in 60 seconds, but I want us to begin the conversation on the electoral bill before we go on that break. Just before we go on that break, the president had said he will sign. We'll let our viewers remind them of what the president said. Now it has been passed. What should Nigerians be expecting?
I believe an assent from Mr. President.
And this one for sure.
Because he's a man that is to be trusted. He speaks what he means, what he believes. And he spoke to you, Sheun, when you interviewed him, and he told you that should the National Assembly effect the necessary amendments, he would assent to the bill. And the letter that he wrote, declining assent to the National Assembly, was very clear. And he indicated his reasons.
Are you in sync with the National Assembly? Because they've passed it. The letter transmitted to the National Assembly, from what they did today, is that in consonance with what the president wanted?
Certainly.
Certainly.
Because what he pointed out in that letter was the need to give the parties the opportunities to have options, not just one form of primary elections.
But for some reasons, the president has introduced consensus into our law, because he suggested it wasn't part of our laws. It was just a silent, a quiet mode, but now it is being introduced officially. But I'll allow you, gentlemen, we'll wrap up on this issue of electoral bill when we return from this break. Just stay with me. We just have a few more minutes with Ms. Honorable Yakub and Mr. Debo Ologunagba on some of the major decisions made by the federal government, that is in the National Assembly and in the executive. We take a break, everyone, and we wrap up on that conversation. Also, we will see Kasim Afegbua and Segun Showumi, both of them members of the PDP, on the debate on the choice of the kind of candidate that should fly the flag of the PDP. Some of them are saying that they don't want old folks to fly their flag, and some others of the opinion that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is the competent. We get into that debate after our conversation with these two gentlemen right here with me. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back. Thank you so much and welcome back to the program, everyone. Honorable Omar El Yakub, the Associate to the President on National Assembly matter liaison from the Executive to the National Assembly, and Mr. Debo Ologunagba, who is the National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party. Both of them have been speaking with us on two major issues tonight: fuel subsidy and the decision of the federal government to wait for another 18 months, and the issue of the electoral bill. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Let's conclude the conversation. You heard what Honorable Yakub said about the issue of the electoral bill that the president is going to sign. Does that gladden your heart? Because I know your party came out when the president refused assent.
No, I mean, we should step backward, Sheung, about not just when he didn't sign. We started this because we knew it was a ploy by the APC to scuttle the most important provision of that amendment, which was the electronic transmission of results from the wards and the units. They never wanted that. And then they brought in some provision about direct primaries, and that's scuttled it. Now, democracy is about how to choose government, and that's fundamental in any democracy, in any system. And what are the principles of that? It must be free, fair, credible, and transparent, and people should believe in it. And how do you do that? It is only when you know your vote counts, when you've cast your vote. And one of the provisions of the amendment to the Electoral Act is that provision, which of course the APC is uncomfortable because it won't allow for manipulation. So we raised the alarm initially. And you recall that the caucus of the PDP in the House of Representatives actually staged a walkout when that provision was introduced. However, because of the importance of this, I believe the National Assembly should have called short its vacation, because it's the base of our democracy, to call short that vacation to pass the amendment, because it's just to remove just one provision.
All right. So let me, because of our time, Honorable Yakub, you heard his position about the electoral. Is that the real reason that your government does not want electronic transmission?
Of course not, Sean. Did the letter of the president suggest anything like that? He would have written and said that these are the concerns that I have and mentioned the electronic transmission. I think the PDP is just looking for excuses for their lack of transparent elections in the last decade. And talking about that, perhaps it's time to also mention the PIA that he's talking about, framework. Since when has the PIA in the works? Since 20 years, almost 20 years. All of PDP didn't have the courage and the will to have a framework that will govern our oil production and distribution in this country. So I think the PDP really doesn't have anything to say in terms of giving legal frameworks to existing or new institutions of government, and certainly even in the agricultural sector. Sean, please, how many people have you known that have gone back to the farms since the administration of President Buhari? How many mills do we have in this country? I can tell you, I have even lost count of the number of rice mills in Kano now, and many other places. And rice is being produced, as he said, that we have pyramids in Abuja, because rice is universal, it's central to literally every state of this country produces rice.
All right.
So what I'm saying here and now is that we have always been for a framework that would ensure that we have a credible, transparent, and an election in 2023 that Nigerians would believe or would accept as being credible and transparent.
We need to go
and
now.
That's why we have
I think one way you will silence the opposition is when the president signs it.
But there's no doubt about
let's wrap up now. Just 30 seconds each for your final thought.
We just hope,
30 seconds, your final
thought. I hope for once, probably the APC would keep to its promise, because they have never kept one. In 2015, they came with a promise to change. When they got in, they changed the promise. We hope the president will not wait for another 30 days to sign this amendment act at this time.
Well, I can assure you the president is going to sign. And if anybody has not kept their promises, it's the PDP. And the PDP misruled for almost 1.5 decades, over 1.5 decades in this country. And let me also take this opportunity to remind my brother here that all their abandoned projects, you can see infrastructural transformation in this country. Things they had abandoned, they never thought could be done. Are being implemented in this government.
We need to go now.
In terms of rail, roads,
because we still have some other
education and health infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Honorable Thank you so much, Editor to the President on National Assembly Matters, and Mr. Debo Ologunagba, our former member. Both of you served in the National Assembly. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
I'll remind you, Nigerians, of what the President said when China Television had an exclusive interview with him on the issue of the mode of primaries and the electoral bill. Take a listen to him, and when we come back from listening to that, you get to meet my new set of panelists on the program. Mr. President, should the National Assembly come back with the bill and they edit out what you don't like, would you still sign it?
I don't think I told them what I don't like. All I said, there should be options. We must not insist that it has to be direct. It should be consensus and indirect.
So if they do that, would you sign it?
Yes, I will. I will sign. All I would like to, is that there should be options. You can't dictate to people, and you said you are doing democracy. Allow them, other options so that they can make a choice.